a unmarried, unguarded second, crossed limitations, we might by no means considered remodeling the whole thing. I never imagined that a quiet night on my own would develop into a memory that would linger for years. It became one of these peaceful nights that felt untouched by way of the arena's chaos. My brother's family had long gone out, leaving me with the rare gift of solitude, a luxury in a residence normally packed with noise and pastime. I relished those moments when silence replaced the usual commotion, allowing me to ultimately unwind after a protracted day. The promise of a warm shower felt like natural bliss. After a simple dinner, I grew to become off the lighting fixtures downstairs, checking each room like I typically did. It became a dependency, I wager, making sure the entirety turned into, so as before I headed up. My nephew Tobias had simply come back to stay with us after being away at school for some months, and we might been being used to having him around once more. He changed into an amazing youngster, but along with his boundless power and that stressed teenage spirit, he frequently threw off the quiet recurring I was used to. The house become empty, or so I notion as, and I went upstairs, keen to unwind. I tossed my clothes into the laundry hamper and became at the shower, letting the water run. Hot steam filled the room, thick and heat, instantly enjoyable me. I stood underneath the movement, letting the day's issues wash away. I closed, my eyes respiratory deeply. It felt exact to be alone with my mind to permit the solitude settle in. I had simply started to loosen up fully, while a legitimate from down the corridor stuck my attention. It turned into faint, barely audible over the hum of the water, but unmistakable a creak in the floorboards. I paused, brushing it off as the same old sounds of an old residence. But then it happened again, this time closer, a slow and deliberate step that appeared too intentional to ignore. The silence lower back heavy and thick. I laughed quietly at myself for being so paranoid. It turned into possibly not anything, just my creativeness going for walks wild. But then, as I continued to listen, I may want to listen the smooth sound of a person's breathing. It turned into steady, nearly rhythmic, and lots too close. Then, just when I idea it turned into all in my head, I noticed a shadow forged across the skinny strip of light at the lowest of the door. My coronary heart started out racing as I realized that someone turned into status just outdoor. In that second, each experience I had became heightened. Each nerve on facet, who could it be? I remembered that my brother and his spouse have been out, and I had no purpose to think that they had come lower back this early. But then it hit me, my nephew Tobias. It's him? I referred to as out, hoping to break the silence, but my voice came out hesitant, as if a part of me didn't want to disturb anything become on the opposite aspect of the door. Hiya, is someone there? For some seconds there was nothing but the sound of my personal respiratory and the consistent hum of the bathe. And then simply as unexpectedly, I heard a tender respond, a voice low and barely audible, that sounded unmistakably like Shan's. Sorry, I did not mean Toy did not know you had been here. He spoke in a hurry, the words tumbling over every different, and I may want to hear the soreness in his voice. He should have idea the toilet was empty or that I might be downstairs. I set free a relieved sigh, looking to shake off the anxiety that had gripped me simply moments earlier then. No worries, I spoke back, my voice sounding a little too joyful even to my personal ears. I'll be out in a minute. However, even after he'd left, I couldn't shake the ordinary feeling that lingered the way he'd paused out of doors the door. The quiet intensity of his presence there has been something oddly charged about the moment, something that made it difficult to loosen up absolutely. I attempted to comb it off as I completed my shower, but the concept kept coming returned. After I finally grew to become off the water and stepped out, the residence changed into silent again. I dried off, dressed quickly, and went to my room, hoping to push the awkward come-upon out of my mind. However, as I lay there, the quiet of the residence felt specific, almost unsettling. I could listen faint sounds coming from Tobias's room, the quiet movements of a person who, like me, turned into nevertheless unsleeping. Hours exceeded, but I could not sleep. The photo of Sean standing outdoor the toilet door, frozen in that moment of hesitation, replayed in my mind, maintaining me on facet. There has been something in his expression, something I couldn't pretty place, that made the encounter sense extra widespread than it must have been. The following morning I woke early, hoping to capture some experience of normalcy. Over breakfast, I came downstairs to find Shan already inside the kitchen, nursing a cup of espresso and searching extra composed than he'd regarded the night before. He glanced up as I entered, his face breaking into an informal smile. "Morning," he said, as though nothing unusual had befell. I compelled a grin, looking to play it off as though it had all been in my imagination. "Morning," I spoke back, grabbing a cup of espresso myself. For a few moments, we stood there in a clumsy silence, every people pretending to be considering our morning routines. However, I couldn't shake the sensation of unease that had settled in since the nighttime before. It changed into like there has been an unstated anxiety within the air, something neither of us turned into inclined to cope with immediately. "So, did you sleep properly?" I asked, seeking to make small speak. Tobias shrugged, taking a slow sip of his espresso. "Yeah, I guess couldn't doze off proper away, although." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Yeah, me neither. Have to be something in the air." "Huh." He gave a half smile. However, there has been something guarded in his expression, a flicker of something I couldn't quite study. He finished his espresso speedy, averting my gaze as he set the mug down at the counter. "Nicely. I have got to move out for a piece," he stated, grabbing his bag from the back of the chair. "I will. So long." "Positive aspect," I replied, watching as he left the kitchen, his footsteps fading down the hallway. Over again, I was by myself with my mind left to make experience of the odd stumble upon. The day surpassed in a blur, my mind continuously returning to the memory of the night before. I attempted to consciousness on work to distract myself with anything that might pull me out of the loop of endless questions. But irrespective of what I did, I couldn't shake the sensation that there was extra to that short moment. Then I understood. It wasn't until later that evening, whilst the house became quiet once more, and each person changed into in bed, that the full weight of that nighttime returned. I lay wakeful, staring at the ceiling, my mind a tangled mess. What had commenced as an harmless night at domestic had one way or the other taken on a distinct tone, interest I could not ignore. And as I lay there, the silence heavy around me, I found out something. Anything had happened that night wasn't going to fade so easily. There has been more to it, greater than I used to be willing to confess to myself. And whether I desired to or now not, I used to be going to have to face it. The following days had been nerve-wracking, filled with moments that felt each mundane and oddly charged. Residing below the equal roof, sharing spaces, brushing beyond each different in hallways. It all of sudden felt complex in a way I hadn't predicted. I tried to tell myself it become not anything, that I used to be reading too much into a simple, awkward moment. But regardless of how hard I attempted to shake it, the air among us had changed. It wasn't lengthy before my suspicions began taking root. Every glance, each fleeting second of eye touch felt loaded, holding more that means than it ought to. I would frequently catch Tobias watching me, his expression unreadable, as if he were trying to discern something out. And just as quick he'd look away, performing as although nothing had happened. The stress among us changed into turning into not possible to disregard, but I did not know how to address it with.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, maybe you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed. Think you're something out of my
Never really know just what you want. With you I don't ever feel calm. I can feel the sweat inside my palms. Play with me like cats and a string. You don't understand the pain it brings. You don't ever wanna give me wings. You don't ever wanna set me free. You know I'm addicted to you, and it's twisted, you've been gifted with the evil voodoo. Got me coming back for more, even when I've been screwed. Dolls full of pins, pierce my heart straight through. I got issues in my head, I like you in my bed, but you keep me on red. Oh, everything is like a test, I better not text or I'll come off desperate.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, baby, you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed, thinking something out of my nightmares, standing right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, then will you get bored of killing me?
So if I play dead, will you regret everything that you did, that you said? I don't think you understand what you're doing, and my heart's black and blue from the bruising. I feel like when I'm with you I'm losing. I feel like you think that this amusing, sitting there gaslighting and confusing. Was it me? Is it me? Am I deluded? I'm the one who's always sorry, the conclusion, even though I offer all of the solutions. I wish you loved me like I love you, it's stupid. When I'm alone with you I never feel lucid. I wish I wasn't struck by Cupid. I wish when I first saw you I knew this. When I'm with you I feel so useless, I feel diluted, my heart's been wounded. Silhouettes of you are like a taunt. Never really know just what you want. With you I don't ever feel calm. I can feel the sweat inside my palms. Play with me like cats and a string. You don't understand the pain it brings. You don't ever wanna give me wings. You don't ever wanna set me free.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, baby, you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed, thinking something out of my nightmares, standing right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, then will you get bored of killing me? Then will you get bored of killing me? And will you get bored of killing me? And will you get bored of killing me?
Tobias in the hallway. He appeared up, startled, and for a second we simply stood there, observing every different. I should see the equal conflicted feelings in his eyes, the identical uncertainty that were plaguing me. "Hiya," he stated, his voice slightly above a whisper. "Good day," I spoke back, my heart pounding in my chest. There has been a long pause, each of us awaiting the opposite to say something to break the silence that had stretched between us for a long way too long. I felt a surge of frustration, a desire to confront something it turned into that become conserving us returned. However, the words wouldn't come. Eventually he took a step forward, his gaze intense, as if he were attempting to find something in my expression. "Are we able to talk?" he requested, his voice full of a quiet urgency. I nodded, not able to accept as true with myself to talk. He led me into the living room, and we sat down, the anxiety among us palpable. He hesitated for a second, his fingers fidgeting in his lap earlier than in the end, looking up. "I experience like there's something we want to get out in the open," he said, his voice barely audible, this tension between us. "I don't know what it's for, however it is using me loopy." His phrases dispatched a jolt via me, and that I felt my pulse quicken, my mind racing. I failed to recognize a way to reply, didn't understand a way to put into words the confusion that were swirling inside me since that night. But I ought to see the equal uncertainty, the equal vulnerability mirrored in his gaze. And for the primary time I found out I wasn't alone in feeling this way. "I do not know either," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "However, I can't forestall considering it." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Neither can I." We sat there in silence, the unstated anxiety among us finally recounted. And for the primary time, I felt a atypical feel of alleviation. It became as though a weight had been lifted, as if the act of admitting the anxiety had by hook or by crook made it less overwhelming. However, even as we sat there, I knew that this became simplest the start, that there has been still a lot left unsaid, so much that neither folks was equipped to confront. And yet in that quiet second, with the afternoon light streaming via the window and the silence settling over us, I felt an extraordinary feel of peace. Whatever occurred subsequent, anything got here of this, I knew that I wasn't by myself, and some way that made all the distinction. The silence lingered among us, heavy but unusually comforting. We both appeared to feel it, a quiet know-how, an unspoken connection that had some way deepened during the last few days. Neither people moved, caught in a second that felt greater sizable than something we would ever shared. For the first time I should see in his eyes a softness, a vulnerability that mirrored my own. It turned into as even though all of the anxiety, all the confusion that had clouded our interactions, had condensed into this single delicate thread among us. Tobias checked out me then, his gaze unwavering as though looking for solutions in my expression. My coronary heart pounded in my chest, every beat louder than the closing as the gap between us seemed to reduce with each passing twad. I desired to say something to break the silence, but words failed, me misplaced inside the intensity of the instant without questioning. I reached out my hand, brushing his ever so lightly. He tensed slightly, however he failed to shrink back. As an alternative, he let out a breath. He regarded too were maintaining his shoulders, relaxing only a little. His hand came up to meet mine, tentative before everything, as though testing the waters. Earlier than he gently intertwined his hands with mine. The warm temperature of his touch dispatched a surge of power through me, and that I couldn't bring myself to permit pass. We stayed like that for a moment, neither of us talking, both lost in a quiet understanding. The room felt exclusive, as though it had closed in around us, leaving simply sufficient area for the two folks. San's gaze softened, his eyes drifting from my face all the way down to our joined palms, as though seeking to manner the importance of all of it. And then, in a movement so subtle, it turned into nearly imperceptible, he leaned nearer. I may want to sense his breath warm and constant, brushing in opposition to my cheek, his proximity sending a thrill down my spine. My pulse quickened, and I found myself inching nearer, too attracted to him, in a manner that felt inevitable, like something we might each been resisting for far too long. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his voice slightly above a breath. However, it held a tenderness I hadn't heard earlier then. I nodded, my heart racing as I peered into his eyes. "Yeah," I murmured, my voice tender, nearly tentative. "I am K." His hand moved, his fingers brushing lightly in opposition to my cheek, tracing a line that dispatched a shiver via me. There has been something distinctly gentle in his touch, something that said a care and information past phrases. It became as though he should experience every thought, every doubt and fear. And in that second he was silently reassuring me that I wasn't alone. I leaned into his touch, my breath catching as his face drew closer, our eyes locked in a gaze that held more than either people could say aloud. After which, in a moment that felt each inevitable and surreal, his lips brushed towards mine, a mild, tentative kiss that sent a shock of warmth via me. It changed into smooth, almost hesitant, as even though he were giving me the hazard to turn away. However, I did not shrink back. Alternatively, I found myself deepening the kiss, interested in him with a pressure I could not withstand. The world appeared to fade round us, the silence filling with the sound of our quiet breaths, the mild rhythm of our hearts beating in sync. I could experience his hand in my hair, his touch as mild as a whisper, and I permit myself sink into the warmth of his embody. There has been a quiet intensity to the moment, a sense of something that have been building among us for a ways too long. Sooner or later, locating release, we broke aside handiest for a second, our breaths mingling within the small space between us, and that I should see the equal surprise, the equal awe in his eyes, that I felt inside myself. Are we sincerely doing this?" he requested, his voice packed with both excitement and uncertainty. I looked at him, my heart racing, and nodded. "I suppose assume we are." His smile was gentle, nearly relieved, and he reached for my hand once more, maintaining it lightly as though afraid to permit move. We sat there close, sharing a quiet that felt extra profound than any phrases should deliver. The anxiety that had once felt so overwhelming had converted into something else completely, something that felt fragile, treasured. Because the evening wore on, we determined ourselves speak me, our voices low, every word wearing a weight that neither folks appeared willing to interrupt. We shared stories, recollections, small portions of ourselves that were hidden away, and with each word the space between us seemed to disappear. It became as although we had been rediscovering each different, seen sides of ourselves that have been buried below layers of pretense and reticence. When the clock struck midnight, I realized how plenty time had passed, how deeply we'd become misplaced in each difference organization. I should sense the warm temperature of his hand in mine, the consistent rhythm of his heartbeat, as we sat there aspect by means of aspect, enveloped in a silence that felt more effective than something I might ever experienced. He glanced at me, a touch of hesitation flickering across his face. "We need to you understand, get some sleep," he stated, his voice quiet, almost reluctant. I nodded, feeling a pang of unhappiness, but I knew he became proper. We couldn't live like this forever, irrespective of how much part of me desired to. Slowly we each stood, neither folks inclined to let cross simply yet, and I could see the same reluctance in his eyes as we stood there going through each different. I felt an awesome urge to attain out, to hold directly to him for only a little longer. And as if reading my thoughts, he pulled me into an embody, his fingers wrapping around me in a way that felt each comforting and exhilarating. I should sense the regular upward thrust and fall of his chest, the warmth of his touch grounding me. and I allow myself sink into the feelings, savoring every second. When we finally pulled apart, there was a quiet information among us, a promise unspoken but deeply felt. I watched him retreat down the corridor, his footsteps smooth and steady, and when he grew to become lower back to have a look at me one final time, I felt a surge of heat, a flicker of wish that maybe simply perhaps this was best the start. Within the days that accompanied, we fell into an unstated rhythm, a quiet intimacy that wove itself into our lives. We nevertheless went approximately our workouts, nevertheless did all the regular matters that crammed our days. But there has been a new layer beneath it all, a connection that bound us in approaches I could not completely understand. Each glance, each shared smile, every unintended brush of fingers, all of it held that means that went beyond words. One afternoon, as we observed ourselves by myself in the house yet again, I felt that acquainted pull, a magnetic force that seemed to draw us closer with each passing second. We had been inside the kitchen, each people busy with distinctive responsibilities, when our eyes met, and that I felt a rush of heat flood through me. Before I knew it, he bridged the distance, his hand enveloping mine. His mild yet firm touch spoke volumes. We had been united without a word. He leaned in his lips, claiming mine in a tender, passionate kiss. Emotions overflowed, leaving me breathless. We parted, foreheads touching our breaths, intertwining. His heat embody enveloped me, a protecting cocoon. Time iced over. The arena dissolved at that moment. Doubts vanished. Best, our simple connection remained. Each hesitation melted away, leaving natural, unadulterated love. Our hearts synchronized, beating as one. Our bodies swayed together, misplaced in the intensity of our emotions. We were two souls, now one. When we eventually pulled apart, he checked out me, his gaze packed with a warm temperature and affection that made my heart pass a beat. "I don't know in which that is going," he said softly, his voice packed with a quiet dedication. "However, I do not want to permit it move." I felt a surge of emotion, a combination of exhilaration and gratitude, and that I nodded my hand, attaining up to touch his face. "Me neither." I whispered, my voice slightly audible, but I knew he heard me. We stood there for a while, truly retaining each other. Each of us lost in a feeling that felt too huge to name, too powerful to disregard. It turned into a fragile element, this bond between us. However, it turned into also something lovely, something that made every moment feel brighter, greater, shiny. As the solar commenced to set, casting a heat glow across the room, we ultimately pulled apart, every of us, knowing that this was best the beginning. There had been nevertheless such a lot of questions, so many uncertainties. However, for the first time I felt a feel of peace, a quiet fact that we were precisely where we had
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. Anxiety, filling up every space, no privacy, and silently, it could build and build until you finally see, whoa, it's taking over, damn, no closure, moving closer. No exposure, I just wanna be a loner. Some can't stay sober, looking over all their shoulders, like moving boulders just to get out of the home. It sucks, I've had enough, I don't wanna feel the stuck under the rug, all my problems that I shove. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough. Nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me, but let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all this stuff. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough. Nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me, but let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all this stuff.
It sucks when you finally feel like giving up. Oh God, no luck. Everything feels like you're sticky stuck. I'm lost, handcuffed to the bed where I sleep. Don't give a fuck, can't stop. Unplug, feeling overwhelmed. I think I've had enough. Gotta find a way to get some energy. Gotta find someone who's a good friend of me. I need purpose to make it all worth it. I'm still searching and I'm still learning. I want a life that's filled with memories, not a life with regret and frenemies. I need focus to keep me from hopeless psychosis if I keep moping.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough. Nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me, but let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all this stuff. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough. Nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me, but let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all this stuff.
Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping, Brother John? Brother John. Morning bells are ringing, morning bells are ringing. Ding dang dong, ding dang dong.
laundry had eventually settled down. I discovered myself outside the cool nighttime air, a welcome comfort from the warmth and noise of the house. I leaned against the porch railing, taking within the stillness of the nighttime. Once I heard footsteps in the back of me. I turned, and there he was, status only a few steps away, his expression unreadable. I would locate you out here," he said, his voice soft as he joined me with the aid of the railing. We stood there in silence, the quiet of the night wrapping around us like a familiar blanket. For a moment, it felt like we were the most effective people within the world, the rest of the house fading into the historical past. "It has been unique, hasn't it?" he asked, his voice packed with a quiet unhappiness. I nodded, feeling a pang of longing. "Yeah, I leave out this." He looked at me, his gaze packed with a tenderness that took my breath away. "So do I." He whispered, his hand attaining out to brush mine. The touch turned into brief, a fleeting reminder of what we had shared, but it was sufficient to send a surge of warmth via me. We stayed like that for some time, neither people willing to move, as though keeping on to the moment would maintain it from slipping away. The nighttime stretched on the sector around us, hushed and still, and in that quiet area, I may want to sense the depth of the relationship that had grown among us. But because the days wore on, truth started to settle in, casting a shadow over the warm temperature. We had shared the gatherings, the workouts, the expectancies. All of them seemed to shut in, tightening around us like vices. It turned into as even though the arena had shifted, pulling us lower back right into a truth. We had tried so difficult to break out. One night, because the family prepared for another round of farewells and goodbyes, I discovered myself alone within the kitchen, misplaced in notion. The house was full of the sounds of laughter and verbal exchange, but I felt an ordinary experience of detachment, a longing for the quiet moments we had shared. He regarded in the doorway, his gaze severe, and that I felt the acquainted flutter in my chest. We exchanged a quiet look, a shared understanding, and in that moment I knew that this become goodbye. Now, not forever, however, for now. As we stood there, surrounded by way of the noise and chaos of family, I felt the experience of peace settle over me, a quiet acceptance of what had come to bypass the bond we had shared, the moments we had cherished. They could stay etched into my memory, a reminder of a connection that were both fleeting and profound. We failed to want words, a simple nod, a tender smile, and the information that from time to time the most significant connections are those that can't be defined or defined. As he walked away, blending into the crowd, I felt a sense of calm wash over me, a quiet guarantee that anything got here next, we'd deliver this moment with us, a piece of our story that could continue to be untouched through time. In the long run, it wasn't about the start or the end. It turned into approximately the journey, the fleeting splendor of a connection that had transformed us each in ways we hadn't expected. And as the nighttime stretched on, full of laughter and memories, I knew that a few testimonies had been intended to be loved, held close, despite the fact that best for a quick, valuable second in time.